Hello everybody and welcome to Yarn of a Kind. My name is Alicia and in today's video I'm going to introduce you to my turtle family. Turtles are everywhere in the crochet world and my video today is not going to be anything new or revolutionary because you've most likely seen these turtle patterns floating around the internet, and I just wanted you to meet the turtles that I have crocheted recently. And of course, I need to reintroduce you to Turtle. This is the first turtle that I ever made, and he was made using Snug as a Bug yarn as well as the Rose and Lily crochet jumbo turtle pattern, which I absolutely love. I cannot sing enough praises about the Rose and Lily crochet video tutorial that I followed for this pattern. It's really clear, it's super beginner friendly, and even after trying a lot of different turtle patterns, the Rose and Lily crochet pattern is still my favorite one, and the techniques used are still my preferred methods. So as I show you my turtles, you're going to hear me talk again and again about how I use the Rose and Lily crochet methods. It's just a great pattern and I will link it in the description box below so that you can go and make your own jumbo turtle. But without further ado, let's dive into the 5 other turtle patterns that I tried recently. This is the lot of them and I'm going to show them to you one by one, starting with the watermelon turtle. This pattern is by Handmade by Emily and I found it on Instagram. If you're relatively new to crochet and you're looking to try out color changes and learn how to do that technique, I would recommend making a watermelon turtle, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend this pattern for a beginner, and there are a few reasons for that. There are a few flaws in this pattern which you might need to take note of if you want to try this out. Firstly, there's a round in the shell, which is round 12, where you're supposed to add in the flippers. I think that particular round was very confusing because it involves chains and slip stitches, so I wasn't really sure why you have to have the slip stitches, and so I ended up defaulting back to the Rose and Lily method. But I didn't feel that this round 12 was very clear, and I also didn't like how the fins are attached sort of closer to the belly. I would have liked it to be a little bit closer to the shell, if you know what I mean. I feel like the fins should have been in row 11 instead of row 12, and I think that aesthetic would have looked a bit better to me. So I wasn't a huge fan of the placement of the fins, but I do like that the front fins are bigger than the back fins, and this is something that I only noticed after I made a few turtles, that this is a preference that I have. If you take a look at the reference photo for the pattern, you'll also notice that I followed the Rose and Lily crochet placement of the eyes because this is how I prefer my turtles to look. If you want, you can follow the designer's recommendation, but I didn't really like the placement of the eyes as well as the smile, so I did not follow this, but you can if you want to. And you may also notice that I added a tail for the turtle. This is not in the original pattern. And I also added seeds on the shell because I think it makes it look so much more like a watermelon. And it doesn't quite look like a watermelon if there are no seeds. So that's the first member of the turtle family. It's the watermelon turtle. The next turtle that I tried is the Rose Turtle by Passionate Crafter, and this is such a great pattern. I just adore how beautiful this shell is, and I think it really looks like a rose. This is actually a 2-in-1 pattern, and there is also a daisy version which you can try if you want to, but I fell in love with the Rose Turtle, so I just made this one. In terms of size, you can see that the Rose Turtle is definitely smaller than the watermelon turtle. So it's like she's the little sister of the family. The fins are all the same size, unlike with the watermelon turtle where the front fins are bigger than the back fins, and they are crocheted directly onto the body, thus making this turtle sort of a no-sew pattern. This is pretty much the only turtle where I didn't use the Rose and Lily crochet method. And one thing to note when you're making this rose turtle is that you should really look at the pictures before you start crocheting, because with the flower shell there is a special stitch where you're crocheting with half double crochets and you're working in the 3rd loop, which is behind the usual 2 loops. There are really clear instructions and pictures in the pattern, so just follow the instructions really closely and you should have no issue. But for me, I actually started off with a magic ring and half double crochets, and then it said increase 1, and somehow I just reverted back to single crochets. And then I looked at the picture and realized that I had it wrong, so I had to frog a little bit. But as long as you read the instructions and you follow them and you check the pictures to make sure that you're progressing in the correct way, you should have no issue, because this pattern is just such a great pattern, such a clear pattern. I would highly recommend it. I also followed the instructions in the pattern to make the tail, but I did not follow the design for the eyes because I just don't have those sparkly giant eyes. So of course I went back to my usual rose and lily eye placement method, which is what you're seeing here. And that's why my turtles look really similar to each other. It's just that they have sort of a different shell. My next turtle is the Flower Turtle by blue.beena, and this is also a 2-in-1 pattern. I made the Sunflower Turtle, but I think there is another version which I believe is a Daisy Turtle, so you can try that one out if you want to, but I used the Sunflower one. I have to say that I generally struggled with this pattern and I ended up tweaking it a lot, so I also would not recommend this pattern for a beginner. I think one of the key reasons why I struggled so much with this pattern is because the designer's stitches look quite different from mine. Her stitches somehow look longer or looser than mine. I don't know what it is, but I have never been able to achieve this specific look for my amigurumi. And if you know what the trick is to have this sort of stitch, can you please just let me know in the comments, because I'm really curious to find out. So to compensate for my tighter, shorter stitches, I added some rounds to the head to make it more of a sphere, because if I followed the pattern exactly as it was written, I would have ended up with a very flat oval shape, and I definitely did not want that. I also noticed a couple of spelling mistakes throughout the pattern, but there was nothing too major and nothing that specifically affected the pattern. And I also noticed that the designer doesn't mention how many fins to make. I suppose it's not too big a deal, and anyone with common sense can figure out that you're supposed to make 2 of the big fins and 2 of the small fins, but I just feel that a good designer should make sure that there is no doubt or ambiguity in the pattern as to what to do. So I always do like patterns that make things super clear. And for the fins, the designer mentions that you sew them on opposite to each other on the body, but it doesn't specify where to sew them on. So it's kind of up to you to look at the picture and eyeball and estimate where to sew them on. And another mistake in this pattern is with the color changes for the sunflower. In the image, it says to start with brown and then change to brown, and then this is corrected in the caption, but then in the caption it says to start the shell in yellow and then continue on in yellow, so even the correction in the caption is wrong as well. I did follow the pattern for the eye placement because it's the rose and lily method. You may notice that the petals are very dense, and I kind of think that this makes it look like a real sunflower. And it's so dense that it's kind of like one petal needs to go up and then the other goes down, the next one goes up, and they sort of alternate like that. And I think that the layering effect there makes it a bit more interesting than if you were to have the petals just spaced out evenly. So I quite like the finished look of the petals, and I would definitely recommend checking out this pattern if you want to make a sunflower turtle that has this specific look. But I would definitely recommend you watch out for those mistakes in the pattern. There were also no instructions to make a tail, so I added my own tail onto the turtle. Turtle number 4 looks a little bit different from the rest, and this is Pumpernickel, the Pumpkin Turtle by Julia from Little World of Whimsy. And if you haven't checked out Julia's free patterns, please go and check out her blog, because I really love her designs and I really appreciate that she has quite a few free patterns on her blog. I love my pumpkin turtle, but I did make a few adjustments to it. So the first thing that I noticed with this pattern is the method of creating the sort of bumps in the pumpkin. And I don't really like this method of like using a string to pull in the yarn, because I work with chenille yarn and I always get so scared that the yarn is going to break, and that would be catastrophic. So I really couldn't imagine using this method to make 4 or 5 bumps. But if you're using a more sturdy yarn like acrylic or cotton yarn, then definitely go ahead with this method. For me, I was just I wasn't brave enough, so I ended up looking for this pumpkin tutorial, which is by Make It Yourself Papari, and I followed this tutorial to make this pumpkin that you see on Pumpernickel here. So I completely swapped out the pumpkin, and that necessitated me fiddling with both patterns. So don't be too surprised if you follow Julia's pattern and it looks different from mine. It's because I get creative and I tweak patterns here and there, and yeah, I just make it work for my own preferences, and it all worked out in the end. For the rest of the turtle, I did follow Julia's pattern quite faithfully. For the head, I did use her eye placement, and I followed the pattern for the legs as well, but I made the legs in brown because I ran out of the green yarn. And I also followed the pattern for the tail, which looks super adorable. And I really love this tendril that's dangling on the side. So that's my fourth turtle, Pumpernickel, the pumpkin turtle. I would highly recommend this pattern, as with all of Julia's patterns. And I also highly recommend the pumpkin tutorial if you're trying to get into that fall mood with autumn coming up soon. Go and check out the link in the description box and you'll be able to make your own pumpkin turtle or pumpkin. And the last turtle that I made is a Kiwi turtle. And I hesitate to say that I used this pattern because I actually very loosely followed it, but it's Fred the Sea Turtle by CJ Designs. I will link this pattern below because it's a great pattern. I just did not follow it very much. But let me explain why. So firstly, the designer was using a larger weight yarn as well as an 8mm hook, and I was using Flutterby yarn, which is much thinner, as well as a 4mm hook. So if I followed the pattern faithfully, I would have ended up with a very small turtle, and I didn't want that. I wanted something that was sort of medium size, sort of similar to the watermelon turtle and the sunflower turtle that I had already made. So I took the liberty of tweaking the pattern, and I also made it a Kiwi turtle, which is obviously not something that featured in the original design. So you're free to check out the pattern, but this Kiwi turtle is really the result of a lot of fiddling around. In this pattern, all the fins are the same size, and this is where I realized that I actually prefer the back fins to be smaller than the front ones, but I was too lazy to frog it or make two other fins, so I just left them all the same size. But now I know that my preference is for two smaller back fins. The original pattern also calls for you to attach the fins into the body as you crochet, but I followed the Rose and Lily method and did the chains and then sewed the fins on, and I like the placement of these fins. You can see that the fins are really close to the shell instead of being like halfway down the belly. So this is very much a look that I prefer. And another thing about this pattern is that it's much more hemispherical compared to some of the turtle patterns out there. So even when I was tweaking the pattern, that hemisphere shape was something that I wanted to preserve. And I hope that you can kind of see that in the shape of the kiwi shell over here. It's hemispherical. And for the design of the shell, I actually referred to a picture by Loop and Billie. And I really like the way that she embroidered the seeds because I think it looks so similar to a real kiwi fruit. So yeah, I'm gonna link her pattern below and you can go and check it out. I don't think that the pattern by CJ Design includes a tail, but I crocheted one and added it on. And yeah, that's how I made my kiwi turtle. I did think of making a pancake turtle, but I did not have the yarn colors needed to make one, so maybe next time. If you can't already tell, I am absolutely obsessed with this turtle family that I've created, and if you have more suggestions for turtles that I should add to the family, feel free to pop them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed meeting my little turtle family, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!